In the conventional truth, we are told that we have to put the oxygen mask first on us and then help others, like when we are in an aircraft. You are saying that we have to help others cross first. How do I reconcile the two?
Actually, there's no such order. I think when we help others, we are helped. I think so. And actually, there's no such divide between samsara and nirvana. The first of the four bodhisattva vows is all beings are numberless, we vow to save them. I know many American people don't like this one, save. But this save or do in Japanese or Chinese means to cross over. So this first vow means I don't cross over this river and enter nirvana until all others entered nirvana. But this is strange, this is very strange vow to me. If all beings are bodhisattvas, who is there? Everyone said, you should go first. Everyone to stay this way. So nirvana is empty. That means bodhisattvas, all bodhisattvas are working within this shore. So, and when all beings are, or bodhisattvas working with this attitude, then this shore becomes nirvana. That means there's no such separation between samsara and nirvana. Only this place, right now, right here.
Okay, well, thank you again. So we have TJ, Michael, Teresa, and then an alumnus, Velchko, who works at the Morcom Museum also. And what I thought I would start out by doing was to do something very brief with the speakers, then turn to the grad students, and then we can open it up. So what I thought I'd do with the speakers is to say, and hopefully this will work. If not, just modify it or disregard it or say jingle bells. Or but it's to just say, okay, by the end of the day, you have one question for somebody else, or one comment, or one thought, something that that occurred to you at the end of the day that we could contribute and play off of. So anybody would like to start with that? No thoughts?
Let's have the thoughts from the audience.
Let's have the audience. Okay, well, before we go to the audience, we'll turn to the grad students who've been thoughtfully here today. So, any comments, questions? Okay,
I want to know how relevant it is. Clearly, Dogen used koan in his teaching. So, when were they stopped to be used, or were they stopped ever in Soto second as a teaching tool?
So the question is, when were they stopped?
Yeah, or if they were ever stopped, because it's such a Rinzai really with koan and sort of like the strict education. So,
Yeah, I'm not sure that anyone really knows the answer to that, but I suspect it's a lot later than we suspect. In other words, of course, for a long time, Dogen's Shobogenzo was not published, it was not readily available. And then when it became available, initially it was ignored, it was not studied that much. But gradually, over time, it became more well known, and by around the early 1920s, it had become regarded as a great masterpiece. And from that point forward, I think the position of Dogen becomes ever more prominent, and as he becomes more prominent, there's sort of a competition over who to define, or who can define him and how he should be defined. And part of that process of defining Dogen is to draw contrast between him and other people. And This, I think, is when we begin to get some of these stereotype images that now we're trying to revise and rectify. And so I suspect around that time, but you know, that's talking about Dogen at an intellectual level. In terms of actual practice, it's much less clear.
Let me add something.
It depends what you mean, actually, by using koans. And they're different uses. So to hold them up as a topic for commentary in a Dharma hall, or to study them in the context of reading a text, there's no necessary association of them in that context with the practice of meditation or zazen. In the Rinzai tradition, you're supposed to work on the koan first and foremost while you're sitting in zazen. And while you're sitting in zazen, the bell rings for Dogen, which is the individual meeting with the master. And anyone who wants to go talk to the master about their koan jumps up and runs and lines up and sees the master and then comes back to the meditation hall. So that's a tradition that's been used in Rinzai Zen since the Edo period at least. So let's say 200 or 300 years. And Soto Zen, as far as I know, has never used koans in exactly that way. So it depends what you mean by use them.
I was more referring to during sermons or explanations of.
You know, they're still used today in for example, Dharma combat ceremony, where the head seat is going to sit in for the abbot and prove that he's qualified to be an abbot himself. And so there's a kind of very formal presentation of a call, and he responds. You know, you could say, well, that's highly ritualized, it's not exactly spontaneous. It's so not spontaneous that in the Soto rules that I translated, the night before, there's another ritual where the abbot and the head seat get together and practice what they're going to do. So even like the cheat the night before is now formalized and is written into the rules. But anyway, they still go on like that.
Well, in terms of the question, though, I think it might be relevant, Will, if you could say something about what you talk about in Soto Zen medieval Japan, the Kirigami tradition in Soto and Ishikoi-Reizon. That seems relevant to Zen.
Well, yeah, I should note, as Dan reminds me, throughout medieval times, again, we don't know how early, but once we start having documentary records, one of the main literary activities of Soto teachers throughout medieval times down to early Tokugawa, so let's say from 14th century down to 17th century, was compiling list of koans and their answers, alternative answers, the poems that go with them, and sometimes these were compiled as curriculums for study and would be part of the teaching process and part of the Dharma transmission process. Sometimes these were public and actually published printed works, but certainly one could not be considered a true Zen teacher unless one was fluent with koan literature in the manner that Griff so skillfully demonstrated for us.
Yeah, let me add one more point, which is, and Will Butterford has a whole chapter on this in that book, but the commentary on koans within the Soto school also included commentary on the Rinzai Roku, the record of Rinzai, of course we associate with the Rinzai school, and Monkan, the Gateless Gate, that we associate with the Rinzai school. So I think the lines of distinction between the schools it was a lot less strict pre-Edo period, but then Edo period sets in, and that causes the the sects have to define themselves. And if you take a position that you stand for this, it has to be different from what the other school stands for, because what's the point of having you if you're doing the same thing as the other one? So that's where I think you get the koan. Rinzai is koan, the Soto is zazen, and we're still left with that legacy. But good, thank you for that question. Any of our other grad students? Yes.
It's intimidating to have such a wonderful panel. And first of all, just thank you so much for a wonderful day. Very interesting. So the task of having the opportunity to ask one question is daunting because this is the opportunity. But so I'm going to be very egotistical and ask something that I care about for my own research, if that's okay. So. And it's with regard to the poems that we saw in your handout. He's following the rules of the 7-character Jueju. So it's an abbreviated, regulated verse, which has 4 lines, and there are very strict tonal patterns, not just the rhyme pattern, but the pattern for the tones is just very, very meticulous. So you can only rhyme in rising tones in lines 1, 2, and 4, or 2 and 4. And then the non-rhyming tones, characters have to be in falling tone. And then if you count 3 characters from the back, they have to be the opposite tone of whichever character is in the final position. It's very, very intricate. And 300 years before Dogen, a lot of the really skillful Chinese poets at the time would break these rules deliberately, which is one way to really show that he knows the rules, but he's an original thinker. He's not going to abide by these rules. So Dogen, being such an extravagant original thinker, he nonetheless chooses to abide very conservatively to these rules. And it made me think, why would he be so strict with himself, and why would he, is he under some kind of pressure to show that he is mastering this form of writing, or is this something he's toying with and he likes it?
Well, if you watch the film, Dogen speaks perfect modern Mandarin, but the issue of whether he actually spoke Chinese, I can tell you right now, as someone who learned my Chinese in Japan, I have no tones. And I think you would share, tones are hopeless, right? And Dogen would have had to been, something close to a native speaker, right? Unless he had a cram book, this character has this tone, we cheat now because it was marks in our dictionaries, right? I still can't pronounce it. But, I wonder about that. I was surprised to hear that Dogen's Chinese poetry did conform. I still not quite convinced about that. Okay.
Well, I think that the thing that might unconvince is that, it does, but the thing that might unconvince is that, again, you go back to the Edo period, that's kind of the black hole for a lot of these things. That Dogen's writings were heavily edited at that time, and it's possible that editors at that time, wanting to make Dogen look like he knew the rules, came in and dressed it up and changed it. That could have happened.
And there was a big influence of Chinese Buddhism in the Edo period.
Yeah, from the black
But those kind of cheat sheets that list all the characters and give all the information about the tones and the rhyme schemes and whatnot, those were already in existence in China during the Song Dynasty. So the Dogen too had access to them. And I think, at least my impression is that he's a very meticulous writer. And in his extensive record, the Ehe Koroku, there's one of the records where he thanks his patron for donating a copy of the Buddhist canon to his monastery. And from that point forward in the record, whenever he quoted a Buddhist text, it's in perfect agreement with the Song Dynasty edition of the Buddhist canon. Where prior to that, sometimes the quotations are slightly off, where things are not quite right.
Yeah.
And so that's a sort of indication that when he was able to check the text, he would, and he was meticulous about it.
Yeah.